Hello, everyone, and welcome to Center for Spiritual Living Rogue Valley in Medford, Oregon. I'm Kimberly Hawkins, Spiritual Director here, and we're all so grateful that you decided to join us for our Sunday celebration. We are an inclusive and welcoming spiritual community dedicated to teaching spiritual tools to transform personal lives and help make a world that works for everyone. And we surely welcome you, no matter where you happen to be on your own personal spiritual journey. With me today is our prayer practitioner, Laura Stewart, who will be giving our invocation and reading.
I know that we are exactly where we are supposed to be, each and every one of us, immersed in the life and the light of the divine, saturated with love. I know that our time together is not only sacred, but it's truly cherished in the eyes of the divine. I know that each and every one of us opens our minds and our hearts to experience the beauty of today's message, the service of those who are making this service available, and the joy of everyone within this room and outside of it. For I know that this time is truly blessed. I am grateful for it. I simply let it go, and we anchor this by saying, and so it is. I would like to share with you a reading from the Living of Science of Mind book. I am conscious that the life and the intelligence within me is some part of the universal spirit. Therefore, I know my mind is one with the infinite mind. Being one with the infinite mind, it is continuously guiding and directed, and all my actions are controlled by the spirit within me. I know exactly what to do in every situation. Every idea necessary to successful living is brought to my attention. The doorway to ever-increasing opportunity for self-expression is ever open before me. I'm continuously meeting new and larger experiences. Every day brings some greater good. Every day brings more blessings and greater self-expression. I am prospered in everything I do. An abundance of good is mine today. And so it is.
The 14th century Persian Sufi mystic poet Hafiz wrote, "Complaint is only possible while living in the suburbs of God." Complaint is only possible while living in the suburbs of God. Now, thinking about it, I don't think there were suburbs in the 14th century. However, Daniel Ladinsky, who was masterful in his translations, put forth the meaning of Hafiz's work rather than the literal translations. So if you think about it, the suburbs of God, it really is not possible to be living in the suburbs of God, because we know that Spirit, the source of all, the heart of all, the Creator, lives both within us and all around us. Another line from Hafiz's poems that I love is, "You are God in drag." And sometimes when we look from our own eyes and not through God's eyes, some of us need a bigger drag costume to look like God, if you know what I mean. Sometimes we have a hard time seeing our fellow human beings as God, and they are always. So we really can't live in the suburbs. I love the line from Alfred Lord Tennyson, who reminded us that God is nearer than the breath, closer than hands and feet. What we can do is have the experience, or in our consciousness think that we're living in the suburbs of God. We can have the experience of feeling separate. And we've been talking for the past several weeks about prosperity. So, there's an appearance of lack, especially in this country in these times. We can look out, and in the effects that are existing, the conditions that are happening, we can see a lack of economic prosperity. We can see a lack of justice in our system. We can see a lack of unity, a lack of harmony, a lack of so many things, a lack of safety when we are all dealing with this pandemic. So we can have the experience of feeling separate, of feeling that, there's not enough. But what I want to talk about today is to have us take a look at, are you living in the suburbs of God? Are you having that experience? And if so, how can we realign ourselves to know, to remember, to have the felt experience that we always live within the city that is God? There is no such thing as the suburbs, my friend. And I'm saying this to remind me as well as to remind all of us, because these are indeed challenging times as we come now to 3 days before our presidential election, and knowing that we probably won't even know the results for some time after Tuesday's election. I've entitled my talk this morning, Time Out, Time In. And I really thought of the term time out because we've been reading Julia Cameron's book, The Prosperous Heart, as our book of the month, and I'm still talking about it. She, if you remember, if you've read it, recommends 5 spiritual practices to develop and nurture a prosperous heart. And they are morning pages, taking time each morning to write out, stream of consciousness, longhand, 3 journal pages, a wonderful practice that I've been doing now for about a month. She also recommends walking, taking at least 2 20-minute walks each week to just be in the present moment. She recommends counting, which is keeping meticulous track of all the money that comes in and all the money that you spend. Again, a wonderful practice in consciousness about being aware of the good that comes in and being conscious of our values and what we are putting our money toward. The 4th practice is what she calls abstinence, and what it means is abstaining from debt, from collecting more debt. The exceptions are our rent or our mortgage and our car payment. As long as you know you can make that payment each month, then it's okay to take that on. The 5th spiritual practice in her toolkit for developing a prosperous heart is something called time out. She describes it as taking 5 minutes both in the morning and the evening to be still. What you do at that time is up to you. You can just meditate, you can pray, you can count your blessings, but it's a practice that she says allows us to be centered and going within our own psyche, being in touch with what's really going on with us. A beautiful, beautiful practice. So really, by taking time out, we do take time in. We take time, instead of looking at all the chaos that may be going on around us, we go within to that place where God lives, God breathes, God speaks to us. We're often guided, we're often inspired when we do that. Now, of course, time out in the sports world gives a team a chance to regroup, right? To rethink. Sometimes a team will take a timeout when things aren't going quite their way. A pitcher can have a timeout to just prepare for the next pitch. And I think that spiritual teachers throughout the eons have taught us that this is a very, very useful practice. Many places in the New Testament, we read that Jesus went apart for a while. He will go to the mountains. He will walk beside the lake. He will spend lonely, solitary time. He did this the night before his crucifixion in the Garden of Gethsemane. He did this quite often before he made a decision with his disciples of the next move in his ministry. Time out, time apart, time to pray, to meditate. Now, other spiritual leaders have done the same thing. If you think about Moses, he went up to Mount Sinai for 40 days before he received the 10 Commandments. Gautama Buddha, we're told, spent 49 days, 7 weeks, in meditation under that Bodhi tree, not moving, not eating. It's quite an amazing feat. And it was out of that time that he received his mission, that he received his revelation, that he became enlightened and began his true ministry. The same is basically true for Muhammad. Muhammad would often go to Mount Hira to meditate, and it was in a cave at Mount Hira where he heard the voice of the angel Jibril and received his revelations, and his mission and his ministry began. So I think if it's good enough for all of those icons in our spiritual world, it's probably a pretty good practice for us to undertake as well. Hafiz describes this in a beautiful, beautiful poem called For 3 Days, which I would like to read to you now. And it has a little bit of humor in it too, which is typical for Hafiz. For 3 days, not many teachers in this world can give you as much enlightenment in 1 year as sitting all alone for 3 days in your closet would do. That means not leaving. Better get a friend to help with a few sandwiches and the chamber pot. And no reading in there or writing poems. That would be cheating. Aim high for a 360-degree detox. This sitting alone, he goes on to say, dear one, don't let Hafiz fool you. A ruby is buried there. Wow. A ruby is buried there. When you sit alone, when you take time out to go within, to take time in. It reminds me of the parable that Jesus told his disciples about the pearl of great price. A merchant was searching everywhere for the most exquisite pearl, and when he found it, he sold everything to purchase it, and the pearl of great price was the kingdom of God. That there is nothing more valuable. And we know, where do we find it? We find it right within. We find it in here. Ernest Holmes, our founder of Science of Mind, said, heaven is within us, and we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. Hafiz said, I think we're frightened every moment of our lives until we know him, meaning God. I take spiritual food from these ancient writers because this, let's face it, folks, this is a challenging time we're all living in. It truly is. And I don't know about you, but it's easy to experience that fear that Hafiz talks about. What's going to happen with the election? How will we respond, both sides, no matter who wins? Will there be a smooth extension or transition of power? Will we get it? Will we be able to take what we know is now not working in our system and help make a nation and a world that works for everyone? What about this pandemic? Will we be able to survive it? There's many questions right now. And so more than ever, it is so important to take this time out. This week, as I have done so more than ever perhaps in my life, I actually have experienced that peace that passeth understanding. And that doesn't mean that a couple hours later, when we're in the fray of daily life and we're hearing the news, we're not back in it again. So it takes persistence, doesn't it? Another practice that I'm going to recommend is something I was introduced to, it must have been back in around the late 80s, early 90s, when my children were young. They attended a small Catholic school in Arizona called St. Jerome's. And every fall, the whole St. Jerome's community, which was a small one, practiced a week of being unplugged. So for 1 week, we're encouraged not to turn on the TV, the radio, not read the news, just unplug completely. Now, in those days, we weren't quite as tethered to our cell phones and our computers as we are today. There was no Facebook. And yet, it made a big difference to do that. And what happened was we had more family time. We played games, we read together, we sat quietly sometimes. And so Julia Cameron, in her Artist's Way book, one of her original books, she had recommended reading deprivation, just as Hafiz talked about when you go into the closet where you don't even read. Reading deprivation, because whenever we're doing something or ingesting ideas from some other source, it takes us out of ourself, and there's great wealth to be had and inspiration to be had when we just sit with ourselves and that internal God. Now, when Julia Cameron teaches these practices, she no longer teaches reading deprivation, she teaches media deprivation. So not only do we not read, but she recommends for 1 week, unplug as much as you can from all media, everything. Now, there's a cute story, and of course we're bombarded, aren't we? We're bombarded searching the internet and Facebook and Twitter. And in one of the classes Cameron was teaching, there was a young woman by the name of Sharon. And when Cameron suggested that the class practice media deprivation for 1 week, Sharon had a fit, basically. She said, there's no way. I can't not check my email. I have to do it for work. And Julia gently reminded her, I'm not telling you can't check your email, but just do it as little as you need to. Do it when you need to, set a specific time during the day, and stay away as much as you can. Well, when Sharon left class that day, Julia thought there's no way she's going to do that. She may not even show up for class next week at all. Sharon was one of these students who came in with her phone in her hand, checking her emails. She would get a loud text or a call during the class, and she would turn the ringer on vibrate. She wouldn't turn it off. So another student in the class could be speaking, and she'd be answering a text, trying to pretend she was paying attention to the teacher, swore that she could multitask, that people in her generation could do this. She would take her phone to dinner, and on and on and on. Well, much to Julia's surprise, Sharon did show up for class the next week. Not only did she show up for class, she didn't have her phone in her hand, and she wasn't reaching into her purse to get it. She had cut her hair, had a new handbag that was very colorful, and she had this look of delight on her face as she walked in the class. And she looked Julia in the eye, and she said, my gosh, I did it. For a whole week, I did it. And she actually got tears in her eyes. And she said, I've realized I have been such a rude person. I go to coffee with my brothers with the intention that we can catch up, and I bring 5 friends along really effectively because I'm checking my phone while we do that. I'm getting out of an elevator, and I'm so lost in my texts that I'm answering a text, and I don't realize I'm standing in the way of everybody getting off the elevator. She said, I feel so embarrassed. And I'm realizing that there are a lot of other people that are acting just like me. And she said to Julia, because the whole point of this class that Julia was teaching was the artist's way was to be more in touch with your creativity. She said, I wrote 5 songs this week, and I am never going back to the old habit again. Wow, what a transformation. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else will be added unto you, we hear in the Bible. I love Joel Goldsmith, who of course wrote a book called Practicing the Presence. It's a book that we read in practitioner training in our faith tradition. And I want to read to you a quote from Joel. He says, when we desire only a God experience, heaven itself will open up and pour itself out at our feet in the form of every kind of good. This is prosperity, my friends. When we desire a God experience and we take time to be with Spirit, to listen to Spirit, the doors of heaven open up. Everything works. Everything flows. Echoing that Hafiz poem, where Hafiz told us that complaint is only possible while living in the suburbs of God, Goldsmith goes on to say this: it would be an impossibility to find ourselves in the presence of God and find anything of a harmonious nature missing in our experience. Oh, doesn't your heart just yearn for that, to have nothing except a harmonious experience right now? I am come, he quotes the Bible, he quotes Jesus, I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. How could we possibly have the presence of that I, the presence of that God, and not have life and have it more abundantly? So when we speak and talk about developing a prosperous heart, experiencing prosperity in all areas of our lives, in loving harmonious relationships with others, even those who are going to vote differently from us, in loving harmonious relationship with ourself, in our health, our well-being, our mental health, peace, in our creativity, this is what we need to do, is practice the presence. I'm going to end with another mystic poet, Rumi. who wrote a poem called Hey. And again, there's a little humor in that. Rumi, from the 15th century, an Indian mystic. Oh, I skipped one. I'm going to go back. I'm going to read another one, and then we'll get to Hey. This was from the 15th century Indian female mystic poet, Mirabai. Isn't it great that we can have all this wisdom that comes from centuries and centuries ago, and it's still true? This, she wrote, a great yogi. In my travels, I spent time with a great yogi. Once he said to me, become so still that you can hear the blood flowing through your veins. Imagine getting that still. One night as I sat in quiet, I seemed on the verge of entering a world inside, so vast, I know it as the source of all of us. One night as I sat in quiet, I seemed on the verge of entering a world inside, so vast, I know it as the source of all of us. Isn't that the truth? The source of all of us is right here within, and we feel it. We are in touch with it when we get still. Finally, from Rumi, from the 13th century. The grass beneath a tree is content and silent. A squirrel holds an acorn in its praying hands, offering thanks, it looks like. The nut tastes sweet. I bet the prayer spiced it up somehow. The broken shell falls on the grass, and the grass looks up and says, "Hey." And the squirrel looks down and says, "Hey." I've been saying "hey" lately to God. Formalities just weren't working. So I encourage us all this week, this incredibly, in some ways, tense week, election week, to say hey to God, to get still, to take time out, to take time in. We're in that stillness. We know all is truly well. So as we emerge from that world inside, so vast, it is the source of all of us. What I know is that we are one. There is one life breathing us all, living us all. We are all God in drag. And I know that source, that divine creator, as absolute peace, infinite abundance of all good. I know it as harmony and love. I know it as balance and good and so much more. I know that it lives me, breathes me. The same is true for each one on the planet. And I know that we're surrounded by its good, that it listens, that it responds, that we are never in the suburbs of God. That is an impossibility. So I pray this week that each of us takes the time to take time out, to take time in, to say hey to God that lives right here, that is never separate, so that we might negotiate these next few days, these next few months, and really the rest of our lives in harmony and oneness, in knowing. Even when we say, I am one with God, the language betrays the truth which we are each a part of it, and it is all that we are. There is peace available at every moment when we connect, always. And like that squirrel, if we spice our life up with prayer, all goes well. So I'm knowing that the highest and best is emerging for this country right now and always. I know that each of us is a part of this evolution, of this awakening, of this change, and that only good can come, that we are each blessed and prospered. And as we do take time out, we feel that and we know that in our hearts. So say a blessing with me for all beings across the planet, that we may be filled with loving kindness, that we may be blessed and guided, no matter whether someone worships in a temple, a mosque, an ashram, a yoga mat, in nature, or perhaps not at all, that we can come together as one and see each other as that ruby, that pearl of great price that each of us is a part of. Giving great thanks to know these truths, to share them with you, giving great thanks to know all is well and all shall be well. I release this word now into the heart, the law of God, which says yes, and we say together, and so it is. Amen. To consider your act of sacred giving. This is something we do each week. So just taking your gift over your heart, and just knowing that as we give, we are blessed. As we give, we receive. It is such a blessing to be consciously aware of all that comes into our life and to be willing to share a part of it. So I invite you, if you are able and inclined, to please donate to Center for Spiritual Living Rogue Valley. We are so grateful for your ongoing support. There are many ways to give. You can mail a check to P.O. Box 1458, Medford, Oregon 97501. You can donate on our website, cslroguevalley.org, by hitting the donate button, or there's also a donate button right here on our Facebook page. By the way, we're also live on YouTube now, so if you're watching on Facebook, that is another alternative for you. We are also in the middle of a pledge drive, so you will be, if you're a member of our community, you'll be receiving an email inviting you to commit to a conscious giving, an estimated conscious giving level for this coming year so that we can plan our budget. And we indeed are so grateful for the continued support that we can continue to bring you all that we do, these Sunday broadcasts as well as our classes and meetings online. Some other brief announcements of things going on in our community. Next week at 1 p.m., next Sunday, we're having a meeting for prospective new members on Zoom. We invite any community members to come as well, but it's a time to find out a little bit more about our philosophy and what membership means. Those who decide to become formal members will be welcomed the following Sunday in our virtual town hall meeting as well as our Sunday broadcast. We also have that town hall meeting will be happening 2 weeks from today, November 15th, yeah. And we continue to have morning spiritual practice calls on Monday and Wednesday on Zoom, as well as a Thursday evening call at 7 p.m. All are welcome to join that. The Zoom links are contained in our weekly e-newsletter. If you'd like to receive the newsletter, there's a way to sign up on Facebook under email. So I think that's it. Oh yes, a book study continues today at 1 o'clock on Zoom, a book study of The Prosperous Heart. All right. Namaste, everyone. The divine in me honors the divine in you. Be well. Take care. With love.